can't take this anymore." Brett's voice cut through the tense silence, his face contorted with rage. "Why the hell should I listen to you?" My heart sank as I braced myself for the inevitable confrontation. What was supposed to be a pleasant family dinner had quickly spiraled into a nightmare. Tessa, my stepdaughter, shot me an apologetic glance before turning to her fiancé. "Brett, please, this is my family." "Family?" He scoffed, glaring at me with utter contempt. "She's nothing but an outsider who wormed her way into our lives." The insult stung like a slap to the face. Anger and hurt swirled within me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "I've been part of this family for over 15 years. Show some respect." "Respect?" Brett let out a derisive laugh. "You don't deserve an ounce of it." Aaron, my husband, finally spoke up. "That's enough, Brett. You've gone too far." But Brett wasn't done. He turned his venomous gaze toward Harper, my younger stepdaughter. "And you're just her little lapdog, aren't you?" blindly following her lead. Harper's eyes blazed with fury. "How dare you talk to us like that?" "I'll talk however I want," Brett sneered. "This is my family now, and I won't have some stepmother and her pet trying to control us." That was the final straw. I slammed my fist on the table, causing the dishes to rattle. "Get out of my house, you ungrateful bastard!" Chaos erupted as Tessa tried to calm Brett, while Aaron attempted to reason with me. Harper stormed out of the room, her footsteps echoing in the hallway. I glared at Brett, every fiber of my being seething with rage. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." As the argument raged on, I knew there was no going back. The insults, the disrespect, it was unforgivable. In that moment, a part of me died, replaced by a burning desire for revenge. Little did Brett know, he had awoken a force he could never comprehend. A mother's wrath. I should have seen the cracks forming years ago, but I was blinded by love and the hope of creating a complete family. It all started when I met Aaron at the office holiday party. He was a divorced father of 2 girls, Tessa and Harper, struggling to balance work and parenthood. I was instantly drawn to his warmth and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about his daughters. 6 months later, we were married, and I found myself thrust into the role of a stepmother. Harper, the youngest, embraced me with open arms. But Tessa, already a rebellious teenager, kept her distance. "She's not my real mom," she'd mutter under her breath whenever I tried to connect with her. Aaron brushed it off as a phase, but I could see the resentment growing in Tessa's eyes with each passing year. "Give her time," he'd say with a reassuring smile. "She'll come around." But she never did. The battles became more frequent, over curfews, boyfriends, and eventually her choice of college. Tessa made it clear that I had no say in her life. "Stay out of it, Yolanda," she'd snap, her voice dripping with venom. "You're not my mother." Each word felt like a dagger to my heart. I tried everything to build a bond with her, but she shut me out at every turn. One night, after a particularly heated argument, I broke down in front of Aaron. "She hates me," I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. "No matter what I do, she'll never accept me." Aaron pulled me close, his embrace offering little comfort. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'll talk to her. We'll sort this out." But we never did. The years passed, and the chasm between Tessa and me only grew wider. Harper remained my lifeline, the one person in the family who truly understood me. "Don't give up on her," Harper would say, her eyes filled with sadness. "Deep down, she knows you love her." But Tessa's hatred had taken root, festering like an open wound, and when she brought Brett into our lives, everything changed. The first time I met him, alarm bells went off in my head. There was an arrogance about him, a sense of entitlement that set my teeth on edge. "So you're the stepmother," he'd said, his voice laced with disdain. I forced a smile, determined to make a good impression. "It's nice to meet you, Brett. I've heard so much about you." He simply sneered and turned away, leaving me standing there like a fool. From that moment on, Brett became the catalyst that tore our family apart. He fueled Tessa's resentment, whispering poisonous words into her ear, turning her against me and Harper. And now, after that fateful dinner, the bonds that once held us together had been shattered beyond repair. As I lay awake that night, anger burned within me like a raging fire. Brett had crossed a line, and I knew there would be no turning back. It was time to make him pay. Tessa's announcement of her engagement should have been a joyous occasion, a chance for our family to mend the fractures that had formed over the years. But deep down, I knew better. I want you all to be a part of this, Tessa had said, her eyes shining with hope as she clutched Brett's hand. Harper beamed at her sister, genuinely happy for her. But I couldn't shake the sense of dread that settled in the pit of my stomach. Of course, we'll be there, Aaron promised, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. This is a celebration for all of us. I forced a smile, determined to make the best of the situation. Maybe this was the olive branch Tessa and I needed to finally put the past behind us. That naive optimism was shattered a month later at the engagement party. The evening started off pleasantly enough, with family and friends gathering to toast the happy couple. But as the drinks flowed, Brett's true colors began to show. "To Tessa and me," he announced, raising his glass with a smug grin. "The future Mr. and Mrs. Keaton, starting a new chapter in our lives without any unnecessary baggage." His eyes locked onto mine, the implication clear. Harper must have sensed the tension because she quickly intervened. "Aw, come on, Brett. We're all family here." "Family?" He let out a derisive laugh. "Don't kid yourself, Harper. Once Tessa and I are married, we'll be cutting ties with all the dead weight." A hush fell over the room as everyone processed his words. I could feel the blood draining from my face. Aaron stepped forward, his voice strained. "Brett, I think you've had too much to drink. Let's take a break." But Brett wasn't done. He turned his venomous gaze toward me, his words slurring with each insult. "You're nothing but a parasite, leeching off my soon-to-be wife's family. Well, let me make one thing clear. You and your little lapdog over there have no place in our lives." That was it, the final straw. Before I could stop myself, I hurled my glass at him, the contents splattering across his smug face. Pandemonium erupted as guests scattered, screaming and shouting. Aaron tried to restrain me, but I was beyond reason. "You miserable piece of trash!" I screamed, struggling against my husband's grip. "How dare you speak to us like that?" Harper rushed to my side, her eyes blazing with fury. "Let's get out of here," she hissed, grabbing my arm. As we stormed out, I caught a glimpse of Tessa's devastated expression. But in that moment, I didn't care. Brett had crossed a line, and there was no going back. We spent the night at my sister Lynette's, Harper doing her best to console me as I raged about Brett's insults. "He's a monster," I spat, pacing back and forth, "and Tessa is too blind to see it." Lynette watched us with a pensive expression, her gaze filled with concern. "You know what you have to do, right?" I froze, meeting her eyes. A silent understanding passed between us. It was time to fight fire with fire, and Brett was about to get burned. In the days following the disastrous engagement party, a dark cloud of anger and resentment hung over me. Brett's vicious words echoed in my mind, fueling the flames of revenge that burned within. Aaron tried to reason with me, but his pleas fell on deaf ears. "Sweetheart, think about what you're doing. This isn't the way to handle things." I whirled on him, my eyes blazing. "And what would you have me do? Sit back and let that bastard disrespect us like that?" He recoiled at the venom in my voice, but I was past the point of caring. Brett had awoken a fury in me that could not be extinguished. Harper remained my steadfast ally, her unwavering support a lifeline in the storm. "Don't listen to Dad," she said, squeezing my hand. "We'll make Brett pay for what he did." Her words were like balm to my wounded soul. At least someone understood the depths of my pain. It was then that Lynette dropped a bombshell. She had connections that could expose the skeletons in Brett's closet. "The guy's been cooking the books at his company for years," she revealed, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Embezzlement, fraud, you name it." A wicked grin spread across my face. "Perfect. It's time we brought that scumbag down a few pegs." Harper's eyes widened, but she didn't protest. Instead, a matching grin tugged at her lips. Over the next few weeks, Lynette fed us information about Brett's shady business dealings. The more we uncovered, the more my hatred for him grew. Aaron, oblivious to our machinations, continued his efforts to reconcile. "Tessa's devastated," he'd say, his brow furrowed with worry. "She needs her family right now." I scoffed at his words. "She made her choice when she decided to marry that piece of trash. Don't expect me to feel sorry for her." The rift between us deepened, with Aaron growing increasingly frustrated with my stubbornness. But I didn't care. My sole focus was on making Brett pay. As the wedding date loomed closer, the tension in our household became palpable. Tessa's phone calls grew more desperate. He's pleading with us to attend the ceremony and support her. "Please, Mom," she'd beg, her voice thick with tears. "I need you there." The use of that word, Mom, sent a pang through my heart, but the wound Brett had inflicted was too raw, the betrayal too deep. "I'm sorry, Tessa," I'd reply, my voice devoid of emotion. "But I can't be there for you this time." Harper remained steadfastly by my side, her loyalty unwavering. "Don't let her guilt you," she'd say, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "We're in this together." And together we would strike, unleashing a storm of retribution that would leave Brett's world in ruins. As the wedding day drew near, the calm before the storm settled over us. But I could feel the electricity crackling in the air, the promise of vengeance waiting to be unleashed. Brett had no idea what was coming for him. The days ticked by with agonizing slowness as Tessa's wedding drew near. Each time the phone rang, I steeled myself for another round of pleading and guilt-tripping. "Mom, please," Tessa would beg, her voice thick with desperation. "I need you there. It wouldn't be the same without you." I could hear the tears in her words, but my resolve remained unshaken. "I'm sorry, Tessa, but you made your choice when you decided to marry that monster." Harper would squeeze my hand, a silent show of support as I delivered those harsh words. She understood the depths of my pain, the utter betrayal I felt at Brett's hands. Aaron, ever the peacemaker, tried in vain to reason with me. "Sweetheart, this is tearing our family apart. Can't you see how much this is hurting Tessa?" I rounded on him, my eyes blazing with fury. "And what about how much Brett has hurt us? Don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for standing up to that piece of trash." He recoiled at the venom in my voice, utterly helpless in the face of my wrath. Lynette, bless her soul, remained my steadfast ally. "Don't let them get to you," she'd say, her voice low and conspiratorial. "We've got the goods on Brett, and it's time to make him pay." With her help, we compiled a dossier of evidence, financial records, emails, and witness testimonies that painted a damning picture of Brett's illegal activities. Embezzlement, fraud, insider trading, the list went on and on. As the wedding day drew closer, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over me. The storm was gathering, and Brett had no idea what was about to hit him. The night before the ceremony, I sat alone in the darkness, clutching the damning evidence in my hands. Memories of Brett's insults, his utter disrespect, flooded my mind, stoking the flames of vengeance that burned within. This wasn't just about teaching him a lesson. It was about protecting Harper, ensuring that she never had to endure the pain and rejection I had suffered at his hands. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Harper slipped into the room, her eyes shining with determination. "It's time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, rising to my feet. Together we marched into the night, the weight of our mission heavy on our shoulders. As the first rays of dawn peeked over the horizon, the authorities were already in motion, armed with the evidence we had provided. Brett's world was about to come crashing down around him. The morning of Tessa's wedding dawned bright and clear, a cruel mockery of the storm that was about to be unleashed. Harper and I arrived at the venue early, slipping into the back of the ceremony hall like two silent wraiths. We kept our distance, watching from the shadows as the guests began to arrive. Aaron tried to approach us, his face etched with worry and confusion. "Delia, Harper, what's going on? Why are you hiding back here?" I met his gaze, my expression cold and unyielding. "Don't worry about us, Aaron. Just enjoy the show." Before he could protest further, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Raised voices and the sound of scuffling reached our ears, cutting through the excited chatter of the guests. Tessa appeared, her beautiful white gown billowing around her as she rushed toward the disturbance. "What's happening? Brett, where are you?" That's when we saw him. Brett, disheveled and wild-eyed, being led away in handcuffs by two stern-faced officers. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they took in the shocking scene. Tessa's face drained of color, her hands flying to her mouth in horror. "Brett, what's going on? Why are you being arrested?" He tried to struggle free, his voice a desperate snarl. "It's all lies. Those bitches set me up." His eyes found mine in the crowd, and for a moment our gazes locked. A twisted smile curved my lips as I reveled in the sweet taste of revenge. The officers hauled him away, his curses and threats echoing through the hall. Tessa collapsed to her knees, great heaving sobs racking her body as the reality of the situation sank in. Harper gripped my arm, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. "You did it," she breathed. "You really did it." I nodded, unable to tear my gaze away from the unraveling disaster before us. Guests were fleeing in droves, their faces etched with disgust and disbelief. Tessa's bridesmaids hovered around her, their expressions a mixture of pity and embarrassment. Aaron pushed his way through the chaos, his face pale and drawn. "Delia, what have you done?" I met his gaze, my expression unapologetic. I did what needed to be done. Brett got exactly what he deserved. He shook his head, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "This isn't how we handle things. You've gone too far." But I didn't care about his disapproval. In that moment, all that mattered was the sweet taste of victory, the knowledge that Brett's reign of terror was over. As the dust settled and the venue emptied, Tessa remained a crumpled figure on the floor, her dreams and hopes for the future shattered around her. Harper squeezed my hand, a silent understanding passing between us. We had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Brett's downfall was just the beginning. In the days following the disastrous wedding, the news of Brett's arrest and the subsequent fallout became the subject of intense media scrutiny. Overnight, Tessa and her disgraced fiance became social pariahs, their reputations in tatters. "Can you believe this?" Harper would exclaim, brandishing the latest tabloid article with a mix of glee and disgust. "They're calling him the embezzling ex-fiancé." I couldn't help but revel in Brett's public humiliation, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me each time his name was dragged through the mud. Tessa, for her part, remained holed up in her apartment, refusing to answer calls or face the world. Aaron tried desperately to reach out to her, but his efforts were met with stony silence. "She's devastated," he confided in me, his eyes filled with a mix of pity and frustration. "I don't know how to help her through this." I scoffed at his words, my contempt for Tessa's wallowing evident. She made her bed when she chose that scumbag over her own family. Don't expect me to feel sorry for her. As the weeks dragged on, the consequences of Brett's actions rippled outward, affecting those closest to him. Business partners severed ties, friends distanced themselves, and his once promising career lay in ruins. It was during this time that I finally confronted him face to face. Harper and I had made a habit of staking out his apartment, reveling in the schadenfreude of watching him slink home each night, a shell of his former arrogant self. One evening as he emerged from the building, his shoulders hunched and his eyes downcast, I couldn't resist the opportunity. Well, if it isn't the disgraced ex-fiancé himself," I called out, my voice dripping with disdain. He whipped around, his eyes widening in recognition and fury. "You," he spat, his hands curling into fists. "You did this to me, you crazy bitch." Harper moved to intervene, but I held up a hand silencing her. This was my moment, and I intended to savor it. "No, Brett," I said, my voice laced with venom. "You did this to yourself. All I did was expose the truth about the kind of lying, cheating scumbag you really are." His face contorted with rage, and for a moment I thought he might strike me. But Harper's presence seemed to give him pause, and he settled for hurling insults instead. "You're going to pay for this," he snarled. "Mark my words, you and your little brat are going to regret the day you crossed me." I threw back my head and laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Regret? The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner. You got exactly what you deserved, you miserable excuse for a human being." With that, I turned on my heel, leaving him seething in impotent fury. Harper fell into step beside me, her eyes shining with admiration. "That was amazing," she breathed. "You really showed him." I nodded, a sense of triumph swelling within me. Brett's threats rang hollow. He was a broken man, his power and influence stripped away. It was then that Tessa finally emerged from her self-imposed exile, her face haggard and her eyes rimmed with dark circles. She sought me out, her expression a mixture of sorrow and shame. "Mom," she began, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. I was so blind, so incredibly stupid." I regarded her coolly, my anger still simmering beneath the surface. "You're right about that. You chose that piece of trash over your own family." Tears welled in her eyes, and she dropped to her knees before me, a broken woman. "I know, and I'm so sorry. Please, You have to believe me, I never meant for things to get so out of hand. Harper hovered nearby, her expression softening as she watched her sister's anguish. I remained unmoved, my heart hardened by years of rejection and pain. Sorry doesn't undo the damage, Tessa. You broke this family, and I don't know if we can ever truly put it back together. Her shoulders shook with sobs, and for a moment I felt a twinge of pity. But the memory of Brett's insults, his utter disrespect, quashed any impulse toward forgiveness. I'll do anything, Tessa pleaded, her voice choked with tears. Anything to make things right again. I gazed down at her, my expression impassive. We'll see about that. But mark my words, Tessa, the path to redemption won't be an easy one. As she wept at my feet, I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope that our family might one day be whole again. In the aftermath of Brett's downfall, the road to healing was a long and arduous one. Tessa remained steadfast in her remorse, her pleas for forgiveness a constant refrain. I know I don't deserve it, she would say, her eyes brimming with tears. But please, give me a chance to make things right. Aaron, ever the peacemaker, urged me to extend an olive branch. She's our daughter, Delia. We have to try and move past this for the sake of our family. I would regard him coolly, my anger still simmering beneath the surface. She made her choice when she chose that scumbag over us. Why should I forgive her now? Harper, caught in the middle, tried her best to mediate. Mom, she's really trying here. Can't you see how much she's hurting? I would soften, if only a little, that at Harper's words. Our bond, forged in the fires of betrayal, remained unbreakable. Slowly, grudgingly, I began to entertain the idea of reconciliation. Tessa's constant presence, her unwavering efforts to make amends, gradually wore away at the walls I had erected around my heart. It was during one of our strained family dinners that the breakthrough finally came. I know I can never undo the pain I've caused, Tessa said, her voice trembling with emotion. But I swear to you, from the bottom of my heart, that I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, and for the first time I felt the icy grip of anger begin to thaw. Harper reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. Give her a chance, Mom, please. I met Tessa's gaze, searching for any trace of deception, any hint of the selfishness that had once consumed her. But all I saw was raw, unguarded remorse. With a heavy sigh, I nodded. All right, but understand this, it's going to take time. A lot of time. Tessa's face crumpled with relief, tears streaming down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. From that day on, the healing process began in earnest. It was a slow, often painful journey, fraught with setbacks and emotional landmines, but Tessa remained steadfast, her commitment to making amends never wavering. Aaron, his eyes shining with pride, watched as our family began to knit itself back together. I knew you could do it, he murmured, pulling me into a warm embrace. Harper, my constant ally, beamed with joy as the rifts between us gradually closed. I told you she was worth another chance, she said, her voice filled with affection for her sister. As for me, I navigated the path to forgiveness with cautious optimism. The wounds ran deep, the scars of betrayal still tender. But in Tessa's unwavering remorse, I saw a glimmer of hope, a chance to reclaim the family I had once cherished. It would be a long road, paved with difficult conversations and hard-won trust. But for the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that we could emerge from this crucible stronger, more resilient, and more tightly bound than ever before. The path to redemption had been set, and though the journey would be arduous, I knew in my heart that we would walk it together as a family. If you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll make sure you regret it for the rest of your miserable life. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them, my body trembling with a mixture of fear and rage as I stared into the cold, unforgiving eyes of my husband, Derek. His fist clenched at his side, knuckles white with fury, and for a moment I thought he might strike me again. But then a twisted smile spread across his lips, and he let out a low, menacing chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. You think you can threaten me, Mallory? He spat, taking a step closer. You're nothing without me. You'd be lost, alone, and penniless if it weren't for my generosity. I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill down my cheeks. This wasn't the first time Derek had lashed out at me, but it was the first time I dared to stand up to him. For too long, I'd been trapped in this gilded cage, blinded by the illusion of the perfect life we'd built together. From the outside, we were the picture of success. A powerful business mogul and his doting wife raising our beautiful daughter, Ava, in a sprawling mansion in the heart of the city. But behind closed doors, Derek's true nature revealed itself, a toxic blend of manipulation and control that had slowly isolated me from my friends and family. "I'm warning you, Derek," I said, my voice quivering despite my best efforts to sound strong. "If you ever touch me or Ava again, I'll leave, and I'll make sure you never find us." His eyes narrowed, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of fear cross his features. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that familiar smirk that made my skin crawl. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, closing the distance between us. "You're mine, Mallory, and if you ever try to leave, I'll make sure you regret it." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed out of the room, leaving me alone with the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. I sank to the floor, my body racked with sobs as the reality of my situation crashed down around me. I had to get out, for Ava's sake and for my own. But how? Derek had made it clear that he wouldn't let us go without a fight, and I knew firsthand how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. As the tears streamed down my face, I silently vowed to find a way. No matter what it took, I would break free from Derek's grip and build a life for Ava and myself, far away from his toxic influence. It was time to stop living in fear and take back control of my life. The next few days were a blur of tension and unease. Derek's outburst had shaken me to my core, but I knew I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to act, for Ava's sake, if not my own. As I went about my daily routine, I found myself constantly on edge, jumping at every sound, every movement in my peripheral vision. Derek, for his part, seemed to revel in my discomfort, shooting me smug glances whenever our paths crossed. "Mom, are you okay?" Ava asked one evening as we sat down for dinner, her brow furrowed with concern. "You've been acting really weird lately." I forced a smile, reaching across the table to give her hand a reassuring squeeze. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little stressed at work, that's all." Derek scoffed, shaking his head. "Your mother's always been a worrier, Ava. It's nothing new." His words cut deep, but I bit my tongue, unwilling to provoke another confrontation in front of our daughter. Instead, I turned my attention back to Ava, determined to keep our conversation light and casual. But as the days wore on, it became increasingly difficult to maintain the facade. Derek's verbal jabs grew more frequent, more pointed, and I found myself constantly on the defensive, struggling to keep my composure. It all came to a head one night after Ava had gone to bed. Derek and I were alone in the living room, and he wasted no time in launching into another tirade. "You think you're so high and mighty, don't you?" he sneered, his words slurred from the countless glasses of scotch he'd downed. "You think you're better than me, but you're nothing without my money and my name." "That's not true," I protested, my voice trembling. "I've worked just as hard as you have to build this life for our family." He let out a harsh laugh, shaking his head. "You're delusional, Mallory. You're nothing but a pretty face, a trophy wife to hang on my arm and make me look good." Before I could react, he was on his feet, towering over me with a look of pure rage twisting his features. "Maybe I need to remind you of your place," he growled, raising his hand as if to strike me. I flinched, bracing myself for the blow, but it never came. Instead, Derek stumbled backward, nearly losing his balance as he glared at me with a mixture of contempt and something else, something I couldn't quite place. "You're pathetic," he spat, turning on his heel and storming out of the room, leaving me shaken and wondering how much longer I could endure this living hell. As I sat there in the silence, my mind raced, trying to make sense of the turmoil that had become my life. I knew I had to get out, but the thought of leaving filled me with a paralyzing fear. What if Derek found us? What if he made good on his threats? I jumped as my phone buzzed, pulling me from my dark thoughts. It was a text from Samantha, my best friend and the only person I trusted enough to confide in. "Are you okay? I have a bad feeling about Derek. Please tell me you're safe." Tears stung my eyes as I read her words, a wave of relief washing over me. Samantha had always been my rock, my voice of reason in the darkest of times. Maybe, just maybe, she could help me find the strength to break free. With trembling fingers, I typed out a response. I need your help. Samantha's arrival was like a breath of fresh air. As soon as she stepped through the door, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the tension that had been coiling inside me for weeks finally beginning to unravel. "Oh, honey?" she murmured, pulling me into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry you've been going through this alone." I clung to her, fighting back tears as the floodgates threatened to open. "I don't know what to do, Sam. He's become so volatile, so unpredictable. I'm scared for Ava and myself." She pulled back, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "You're going to leave him. That's what you're going to do." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Leave Derek? The thought had crossed my mind more times than I could count, but the fear of his retaliation had always held me back. "I can't," I whispered, shaking my head. "You know how vindictive he can be. If I try to leave, he'll make our lives a living hell." Samantha's grip on my shoulders tightened, her gaze unwavering. "Mallory, listen to me. You are stronger than this. You have to be strong, for Ava's sake, if not your own. Derek is a monster, and you can't let him control you any longer." Her words struck a chord deep within me, igniting a spark of defiance that I thought had long since been extinguished. She was right. I couldn't let Derek continue to hold this power over me, over our family. "Okay," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll leave him." Samantha's face broke into a relieved smile, and she pulled me into another fierce hug. "Thank God. We'll figure this out, Mal. I promise. You and Ava are going to be safe." Over the next few days, we hatched our plan. Samantha helped me open a secret bank account, squirreling away as much money as I could without arousing Derek's suspicion. We researched safe houses, potential places we could go to start over, far away from his reach. All the while, I walked on eggshells around Derek, careful not to give him any inkling of my intentions. But the strain was starting to show, and he grew increasingly suspicious of my behavior. "What's going on with you lately?" he demanded one night, cornering me in the kitchen. "You've been acting strange, distant." I forced a smile, willing my hands not to tremble. "It's nothing, Derek. I've just been stressed with work, that's all." His eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, backing me against the counter. "Don't lie to me, Mallory. I know when you're hiding something." My heart pounded in my chest as he leaned in, his breath hot on my face. "If I find out you're up to something, you'll regret it. Do you understand?" I nodded mutely, too terrified to speak. Derek held my gaze for a few more agonizing seconds before turning and stalking out of the room, leaving me shaken to my core. As soon as he was gone, I sank to the floor, burying my face in my hands as the sobs racked my body. How much longer could I keep this up? How much longer before Derek saw through my lies and unleashed his fury upon us? I knew then that I had to act fast. Our lives depended on it. It all came crashing down one fateful night. I should have been more careful, more vigilant, but in my desperation to gather enough funds for our escape, I grew careless. I had just returned from a clandestine meeting with Samantha, slipping the latest cash withdrawal into the hidden compartment in my closet, when I heard the unmistakable sound of Derek's footsteps approaching. My heart dropped into my stomach as he flung open the bedroom door, his face contorted with rage. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled envelope, one of the many I had used to squirrel away our escape money. "What is this?" he snarled, brandishing the envelope like a weapon. "What the hell have you been up to, Mallory?" I froze, my mind racing as I scrambled for an excuse, any lie that might defuse the situation. But Derek was having none of it. In a flash, he crossed the room and yanked open the closet door, his eyes widening as he discovered the hidden stash of cash. "You lying bitch," he growled, whirling on me with a look of pure fury. "You were planning to leave me, weren't you?" I tried to speak, to explain, but the words caught in my throat as Derek advanced on me, his fists clenched at his sides. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" he roared, spittle flying from his lips. "You ungrateful whore." Before I could react, his hand lashed out, striking me across the face with such force that I stumbled backwards, stars dancing before my eyes. "Derek, please," I begged, tasting blood on my split lip. "I was only trying to protect Ava and myself. You've become so volatile, so abusive. I couldn't take it anymore." His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of remorse cross his features. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, calculating fury that chilled me to the bone. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, grabbing a fistful of my hair and wrenching my head back. "You belong to me, Mallory, and if you ever try to leave again, I swear to God, I'll take everything from you, including Ava." The mention of our daughter's name sent a wave of panic crashing over me. I couldn't let him hurt her, not my sweet, innocent Ava. "Please, Derek," I sobbed, clawing at his iron grip. "Don't bring her into this. She's just a child." He let out a cruel laugh, his grip tightening until I thought my scalp might tear. "She's my child too, Mallory. And if you think you can take her away from me, you're sorely mistaken." With a final, vicious yank, he released me, sending me crumpling to the floor in a heap. As I lay there, cradling my throbbing head, I knew in that moment that our lives were in grave danger. We had to get out, and fast, before Derek's rage spiraled out of control. Because this time, I feared there would be no coming back. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. As soon as Derek stormed out of the bedroom, I sprang into action, my mind laser-focused on one goal: getting Ava and myself out of that house before it was too late. I scrambled to gather our essentials: a few changes of clothes, our passports, and the meager stash of cash I had managed to squirrel away before Derek discovered my plan. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough to get us started on our new life, wherever that may be. My hands trembled as I packed, my heart pounding in my chest with each passing minute. I knew Derek wouldn't be gone long, and when he returned, his fury would be tenfold. As if on cue, I heard the unmistakable sound of his car pulling into the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel like a death knell. I had to move fast. Abandoning the half-packed bag, I raced down the hall to Ava's room, bursting through the door to find her sitting cross-legged on her bed, earbuds in and oblivious to the chaos unfolding around her. "Ava," I hissed, startling her from her reverie. "We have to go now." Her eyes widened, confusion and fear flickering across her delicate features. "Mom, what's going on? What's happening?" I grabbed her by the shoulders, my grip perhaps a little too tight as I fought to keep my panic at bay. "There's no time to explain. We have to leave before your father gets back. Our lives depend on it." She must have seen the desperation in my eyes, because she didn't argue or question me further. With a shaky nod, she rose from the bed and followed me back to the bedroom, where I hurriedly stuffed the last of our belongings into the bag. The sound of the front door slamming sent a jolt of terror through me, and I froze, my heart in my throat. "Mallory." Derek's voice boomed from downstairs, laced with a menacing fury that made my blood run cold. "Where the hell are you, you lying bitch?" Ava whimpered, her eyes wide with fear, and I knew we had to move, now or never. Slinging the bag over my shoulder, I grabbed her hand and pulled her towards the bedroom window, my mind racing as I formulated our escape route. "We're going out this way," I whispered, already working to pry open the stubborn pain. "There's a trellis on the side of the house. We can climb down and make a run for the car." Ava nodded, her face pale but resolute. In that moment, I saw a strength in her that I hadn't realized she possessed, a steely determination that filled me with equal parts pride and sorrow. No child should ever have to experience the horrors we had endured. With a final heave, the window gave way, and I ushered Ava through, following close behind, just as the sound of Derek's thunderous footsteps reached the top of the stairs. We moved quickly, silently, our hearts pounding in tandem as we shimmied down the trellis and hit the ground running. The car was just ahead, our salvation glinting in the moonlight like a beacon of hope. But as we neared it, a figure emerged from the shadows, blocking our path. "Derek? Going somewhere?" He sneered, his eyes glinting with a feral madness that sent chills down my spine. In that moment, time seemed to slow to a crawl. I could see the rage etched into every line of Derek's face, the hatred burning in his eyes as he stared us down like cornered prey. And in that moment, I knew. There was no going back. The days and weeks that followed our escape were a blur of constant motion, a never-ending cycle of fleeing and hiding. We couldn't risk staying in one place for too long, not with Derek's resources and his unquenchable thirst for revenge. Samantha had been our lifeline, our guardian angel in those early days. She helped us secure false identities, safe houses, and transportation as we hopscotched across the country, always one step ahead of Derek's hired goons. But the psychological toll of living in perpetual fear was immense. Ava, my once vibrant and carefree daughter, grew sullen and withdrawn, her eyes haunted by the horrors she had witnessed. And I, too, found myself jumping at every shadow, every unexpected sound, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. Still, we persevered, driven by the knowledge that the alternative, falling back into Derek's clutches, was unthinkable. It was during one of our brief respites, holed up in a dingy motel on the outskirts of some nameless town, that the first crack in our defenses appeared. "Mom, how much longer are we going to have to keep running?" Ava asked, her voice small and defeated as she stared out the grimy window. I swallowed hard, my heart aching at the weariness etched into her young features. "As long as it takes, sweetheart, until we're sure your father can't find us." She turned to face me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "But what if he never stops looking? What if we have to spend the rest of our lives like this, always running, always afraid?" The questions hung heavy in the air, their weight crushing me under the weight of their implications. Because deep down, I knew she was right. Derek was a man possessed, and he would stop at nothing to track us down, to exact his twisted brand of revenge. "I don't know, Ava," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion, "but I promise you, we'll find a way to make it through this. Together." She nodded, but the spark of hope in her eyes had dimmed, replaced by a weary resignation that broke my heart. In that moment, I vowed to find a way to end this nightmare, once and for all. We couldn't go on living like this, constantly looking over our shoulders, our lives forever tainted by the specter of Derek's rage. It was time to take the fight to him. Over the next few weeks, I began to hatch a plan, reaching out to old contacts, calling in favors, and assembling a team of people I could trust to help bring Derek down. It was a risky gambit, but one I was willing to take if it meant finally securing our freedom. And then, just when I thought we had hit another dead end, a break in the case arrived in the form of an anonymous tip. Derek's location, his movements, his routine. It was the opportunity we had been waiting for, the chance to strike back and end this twisted game of cat and mouse once and for all. As I relayed the information to my team, a sense of grim determination settled over me. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. The showdown was inevitable, and only one of us would emerge victorious. I only hoped that when the dust settled, Ava and I would be the ones left standing. The safe house was a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of town, its weathered exterior belying the high-tech command center that lay within. As I stepped through the reinforced steel door, my heart was pounding in my chest, a heady mix of adrenaline and trepidation coursing through my veins. "You're sure about this, Mal?" Samantha's voice broke the tense silence, her eyes searching mine for any hint of doubt or hesitation. "There's no going back after tonight." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve as I gave her a curt nod. "I'm sure Derek has to be stopped once and for all, for Ava's sake, if not my own." She pursed her lips, clearly not thrilled with the plan, but respecting my decision nonetheless. "All right then, let's get this show on the road." Around us, the team of ex-military operatives and private investigators I had assembled sprang into action, checking weapons and running final system diagnostics. The air was thick with tension, the weight of what was to come hanging over us like a shroud. "We have eyes on the target," came a gruff voice from the comm station, shattering the silence. "He's just left his office and is en route to the rendezvous point." My breath caught in my throat as a grainy image of Derek flickered onto the main monitor. His face twisted into a scowl as he stalked towards his waiting car. Seeing him again, even through the distorted lens of a surveillance camera, sent a chill down my spine and reignited the smoldering embers of fear and rage that had burned within me for so long. "Remember, we need him alive," I reminded the team, my voice steadier than I felt. "At least for now, he has to face justice for what he's done." A chorus of grunts and nods met my words. The men and women around me hardened professionals who understood the gravity of the situation. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of dread that had taken root in the pit of my stomach. What if something went wrong? What if Derek managed to slip through our grasp once again, disappearing into the ether and leaving us to pick up the pieces of our shattered lives. I pushed the doubts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. This was our one shot, our chance to end this nightmare once and for all. Failure was not an option. The minutes ticked by like hours as we waited with bated breath, tracking Derek's movements on the monitors until finally the call came in. He's arrived at the rendezvous point, moving into position. My heart leapt into my throat as the team sprang into action, donning tactical gear and checking weapons one last time before filing out of the safe house and into the waiting armored vehicles. "Stay safe," Samantha murmured, pulling me into a fierce hug. "And give that bastard hell for me." I nodded, unable to find the words as a lump formed in my throat. This was it, the moment I had been both dreading and anticipating for what felt like an eternity. As the convoy roared to life and peeled out onto the deserted street, I found myself gripping the edge of the console, my knuckles white with tension. Every fiber of my being was focused on the mission, on the confrontation that was about to unfold. Derek's reign of terror was about to come to an end. One way or another, tonight would be the end of the road, and I would be the one to put the final nail in his coffin. The days and weeks following Derek's capture were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media scrutiny, and the long, arduous process of picking up the pieces of our shattered lives. But through it all, a weight had been lifted, a burden that had pressed down on Ava and me for far too long. As the truth about Derek's abuse and his relentless pursuit of us came to light, the world seemed to hold its collective breath, transfixed by the sordid tale of a once powerful man brought low by his own monstrous actions. And while the court of public opinion was swift and merciless in its condemnation, it was the judicial system's reckoning that truly mattered. The trial was a grueling ordeal, with Derek's high-priced legal team doing everything in their power to cast doubt on our testimony and paint him as the victim. But in the end, the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern of abuse too well documented to be denied. When the guilty verdict was read, a hush fell over the courtroom, broken only by the soft sound of Derek's sobs as he was led away in chains. In that moment, I felt a sense of vindication, of justice finally being served after years of living in fear and torment. But more than that, I felt a profound sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in what felt like an eternity. In the days and weeks that followed, Ava and I began the slow process of rebuilding our lives, piece by shattered piece. It wasn't easy. The scars of our ordeal ran deep, both physical and emotional, but we were determined to forge ahead, to reclaim the happiness and sense of security that had been stolen from us for far too long. Samantha was a constant source of strength and support, her unwavering friendship a lifeline that helped us navigate the choppy waters of our newfound freedom. Together, we found a cozy little apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a far cry from the opulent prison we had once called home. But to me, it was a palace, a sanctuary where we could finally let our guard down and begin to heal. As the months passed, I watched with a mixture of pride and wonder as Ava blossomed before my eyes, the shadows that had haunted her gaze gradually giving way to a newfound sense of joy and optimism. She threw herself into her studies, determined to make the most of the second chance we had been given, and I couldn't have been prouder of the strong, resilient young woman she was becoming. For my part, I found solace in the simple pleasures of life. Long walks in the park, lazy Sunday mornings spent curled up with a good book, and evenings spent laughing and reminiscing with Samantha over a bottle of wine. It was a far cry from the high-powered corporate world I had once inhabited, but in many ways it was infinitely more fulfilling. And through it all, the specter of Derek's legacy faded, his once formidable presence reduced to a mere footnote in the story of our lives. We had survived his reign of terror, emerging from the ashes stronger and more resilient than ever before. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was excited to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because now, we were free to chart our own course, to write our own story, and to embrace the future with open arms. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.